David had lived in the quiet neighborhood of Pinewood for 3 years. The streets were lined with tall trees, children rode bicycles during the evenings, and the sound of birds filled the mornings. Most of the people there lived calm and ordinary lives. David also lived a simple life, but there was one thing most of his neighbors did not know: David was the chief of police in the city. He liked to keep his work private when he was at home. For him, Pinewood was a place to relax. He cut his own lawn, waved to his neighbors, and walked his dog every evening. But behind his calm smile was a man who had seen more trouble than many could imagine. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, often called the HOA. It was supposed to help keep Pinewood clean and organized. They made sure houses were painted, lawns trimmed, and streets free from trash. But over time, the HOA had become something more controlling. They started sending warning letters for small things, like a garden hose left on the driveway or a flower bed that was not trimmed properly. David had received a few letters, but he ignored them when they were unreasonable. He believed rules were fine as long as they made sense. He had no problem with keeping his home neat, but he was not going to repaint his house because the board thought the color was too dull. One evening, as David was grilling food in his backyard, his neighbor Mark leaned over the fence. Mark was a friendly man who often shared news from around the block. "David," Mark said in a low voice, "be careful with the HOA. They have been talking about you." David raised an eyebrow. "Talking about me? What for?" "They say you don't follow their orders. I heard them at the last meeting. They don't like that you ignore their letters. They said they would do something big if you keep pushing back." David smiled calmly. "Let them try. I don't live under fear." Mark shook his head. "Just watch out. They seem serious." That night, David thought about what Mark had said. He had dealt with criminals, smugglers, and dangerous gangs in his career. If the HOA thought they could scare him with threats, they had chosen the wrong man. The next morning, something unusual happened. As David was leaving for work, a black car stopped in front of his house. 2 men stepped out. They wore dark uniforms that looked similar to police outfits, but something about them was off. Their badges shined in the sunlight, but the designs were strange, not like the official ones David had seen all his life. One of the men, tall and broad, walked up to him. "Sir, you are under arrest for violating community laws," the man declared. David paused, studying the man's face. "Community laws?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "Yes," the man replied quickly. "You failed to comply with HOA regulations. We are taking you in." David noticed their shoes were not regulation boots, their belts carried no real equipment, and their posture was nothing like trained officers. These were not real police. "And who sent you?" David asked, his voice steady. The second man, shorter and nervous looking, replied, "The Homeowners Association. They gave us authority." David almost laughed. Authority from the HOA meant nothing in the eyes of the law. Still, he kept a straight face. "Do you two have any idea who I am?" David asked, taking a slow step forward. The tall man smirked. "It doesn't matter who you are. You're just another homeowner who broke the rules." David reached into his pocket and pulled out his real badge. The sunlight reflected on the golden emblem of the city police. He held it up where both men could see clearly. "I am Chief David Miller," he said firmly. "Chief of Police. And what you are doing right now is a serious crime, impersonating officers." The 2 men froze. The tall man's smirk vanished, and the nervous one's hands began to shake. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. "You thought you could come here, pretend to be police, and drag me away for the HOA." David's voice was calm but carried a weight of authority. "You picked the wrong house." The men slowly stepped back toward their car. The nervous one whispered, "We should leave." But David wasn't going to let them go so easily. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "This is Chief Miller," he said. "I have 2 suspects impersonating officers at my residence. Send a unit." The fake officers panicked. They ran back to their car, jumped in, and sped away down the street. David watched them go, his eyes sharp. He knew this was not the end. If the HOA had gone so far as to send fake officers, then something bigger was happening behind the scenes. As he closed his gate, David thought about his next step. He had faced criminals before, but this was different. This was personal. The HOA was not just being strict. They were trying to control people through fear and lies. And now, they had chosen him as their target. David was not the kind of man to back down. If the HOA wanted a fight, they were about to learn what it meant to challenge the chief of police. The following morning, Pinewood looked as calm as ever. Children walked to school, neighbors waved while watering their plants, and the sound of lawnmowers filled the air. Yet for David, the peaceful picture was nothing but a cover. He knew the truth: 2 men had tried to arrest him under the false banner of authority. And they had been sent by the very group meant to keep order in the neighborhood, the HOA. David sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, his badge resting on the counter beside him. He was not a man easily shaken, but he could not ignore what had happened. Impersonating officers was not a small crime. It meant there was an organized plan. Someone had spent time and money to create fake uniforms, fake badges, and a story convincing enough to fool ordinary neighbors. The question in his mind was simple: why? Later that day, David arrived at the police station. His officers greeted him with respect as always, but he carried himself with a heavier air than usual. He called in 2 trusted detectives, Anna and Greg, into his office. "There is something happening in Pinewood," David told them. "2 men came to my house yesterday pretending to be police. They claimed they were arresting me for HOA violations." Anna frowned. "That is bold. Who would dare to try that on you of all people?" "That's what I want to find out," David said. "The HOA is behind it? But I don't know if it's just a few members acting out of line, or something deeper." Greg leaned forward. "Do you want us to start digging?" "Yes," David replied. Quietly. "No official noise yet. I don't want the whole city to know until we understand what we are dealing with. Talk to neighbors, check records, see if the HOA has ties with anyone unusual. And one more thing: trace the black car that came yesterday. It had no plates in the front." The detectives nodded and left with determination. That evening, David took his usual walk through the neighborhood with his dog, Max. The people greeted him warmly, but he noticed more than a few curious eyes watching from windows. It felt as if the whole street was whispering about him. At the corner, he met Mrs. Turner, an elderly woman who often sat on her porch. She waved at him and called, "David, I heard strange things about you." "What kind of strange things?" David asked, kneeling slightly so she could hear him better. "They said you are a troublemaker. That you don't respect the community rules. Some even say you might be dangerous." David raised his brows. "Dangerous?" "Yes," Mrs. Turner said. "That's what the HOA has been telling people. They held a meeting last night. I didn't go, but my friend did. She told me they warned everyone to stay away from you." David thanked her kindly and walked back with his mind heavy. The HOA was not only trying to scare him directly, they were poisoning the minds of the people around him. That was a dangerous game. When he returned home, his phone buzzed. It was Anna. "Chief, we found something," she said. "The HOA is not just a normal board. Their president, a man named Clark Benson, has strange connections. He owns a private security company. And guess what? 2 of his employees match the description of the men who came to your house." David's eyes narrowed. "So the fake officers were his men?" "Yes," Anna confirmed. "And it gets stranger. his company has been getting large payments from unknown accounts. We're still tracking the source, but it looks like more than neighborhood fees. David leaned back in his chair. Clark Benson was not just a strict leader who cared about painted fences and trimmed lawns. He was using his position to build power. But power for what? That night, David received a letter slipped under his door. It was not the usual printed warning from the HOA. This one was handwritten. It read, "You are making a mistake. Step back, or you will regret it." David folded the letter carefully. It was no longer about rules or warnings. This was a direct threat. The next day at the station, Greg brought in more information. "Chief, I spoke with a former HOA board member who quit last year. He said Benson runs the board like a king. Anyone who opposes him is pushed out. He uses fines and threats to control people. Some even think he is using the HOA to launder money." David tapped his fingers on the desk. "That explains the payments. It also explains the fake officers. He wants to silence anyone who refuses to obey him." Anna added, "But why target you so openly? He must know you are the chief of police." "Because he is testing me," David said calmly. "He wants to see if fear can break me like it breaks the others. But he made a mistake. I don't bend to fear." The detectives looked at him with respect. David knew what had to be done. The HOA had crossed a line. He was not only protecting his home now. He was protecting the entire neighborhood. If Benson was misusing power, then every family in Pinewood was at risk. That evening, David stood by his window, watching the street lights glow. Max lay at his feet, quiet and loyal. In the silence, David made a promise to himself. He would not wait for the HOA to strike again. He would take the fight to them. And this time, he would expose every secret hiding behind their polished smiles and friendly neighborhood rules. The morning air in Pinewood was crisp, but David felt no calm as he stepped outside. The letter from the night before still sat on his desk, its words echoing in his mind. Step back or regret it? Benson was testing his limits, and David had no intention of stepping back. He decided it was time to meet the man directly. Clark Benson, president of the HOA, owner of a private security company, and the one hiding behind uniforms that had tried to drag him away. David dressed in plain clothes, leaving his police badge in his pocket. He wanted to walk in as a neighbor, not as a chief. If Benson thought of him only as a homeowner, it might make the man careless with his words. The HOA office was a small brick building near the entrance of Pinewood. A sign outside read "Community First, Order Always." The words looked friendly at first glance, but David now saw them as a mask hiding control. Inside, the front desk worker, a young man in a neat shirt, looked up quickly. "Good morning, sir. Do you have an appointment?" "No," David said calmly. "I would like to see Mr. Benson." The worker hesitated, clearly nervous, but after a phone call, he guided David to a back office. Clark Benson stood behind a polished wooden desk. He was tall, with sharp eyes and a smile that seemed friendly but cold. His suit was pressed perfectly, his tie knotted with care. He extended his hand as David entered. "Mr. Miller, welcome," Benson said smoothly. "I've been hoping to meet you." David shook his hand firmly. "Then here I am." Benson gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit. I like to know all the people in this neighborhood. We value order here." David sat but kept his eyes locked on Benson. "Order is good. But order is not the same as control." Benson's smile did not fade. "Strong communities need strong leadership. Sometimes people forget rules are for their own good. That's when the HOA must remind them. By sending men dressed as officers to drag neighbors away?" David asked, his voice calm but sharp. For the first time, Benson's smile wavered, though only slightly. "You misunderstand. Those men were part of my private security team. They may have acted too strongly. I'll speak with them. David leaned forward. They broke the law. And you gave the order. Benson's eyes narrowed. The friendliness in his tone thinned. You are not just any neighbor, are you? David reached into his pocket and placed his badge on the desk. The gold emblem gleamed. Chief of Police, he said. And I don't tolerate imposters. Benson looked at the badge, then back at David. His smile returned, colder than before. So that's how it is. I must admit, Chief, you complicate matters. Most people here fall in line easily. They don't question. They don't resist. I'm not most people, David said. Benson leaned back in his chair. No, you are not. And that's a problem. You see, this neighborhood thrives because of my leadership. Without me, Pinewood would fall into chaos. David shook his head. Pinewood thrives because families work hard and respect each other. Not because of fear. And if you think you can build power through threats and lies, you're mistaken. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Benson spoke in a low voice. Chief Miller, I advise you to step carefully. You may have authority in the city, but here in Pinewood, people listen to me. One word from me, and every neighbor will see you as the enemy. Do you really want that? David stood, placing his badge back in his pocket. If protecting this neighborhood makes me the enemy, so be it. He left the office without another word. Outside, David felt the weight of what had just happened. Benson had shown his true face, a man who believed himself untouchable. But David knew men like that. He had dealt with worse in his career. Power built on fear always cracked when exposed to light. That evening, David met with Anna and Greg at the station. He told them everything Benson had said. He basically admitted he controls people with fear, Anna said. And he threatened you. Greg added, we should move on him now. Arrest him for impersonation and threats. Not yet, David replied. If we move too early, he'll twist it. He'll say I used my position for personal revenge. We need evidence strong enough that no one can deny his crimes. Anna nodded slowly. Then we need to find where his money comes from. If he's using the HOA for something bigger, there will be records. Greg leaned back in his chair. I'll dig into his company. If he's laundering money, we'll find it. David agreed. And I'll keep walking the neighborhood. People are afraid, but some will talk if they feel safe. We'll gather every piece until the picture is clear. That night, as David walked Max down the street, he noticed a car parked with its lights off. He felt eyes watching him. Whoever it was, they were not neighbors out for a drive. He kept walking calmly, but his mind sharpened. Benson was not wasting time. He had already placed shadows on him. David knew then that the game had changed. This was no longer about rules on lawns or paint colors. Benson had turned the HOA into a shield for something far more dangerous. And David was the only one willing to stand against it. The next few days in Pinewood passed with quiet tension. To most neighbors, life went on as usual, but for David, every sound and shadow felt sharper. He had seen the parked car more than once now. It never stayed long, but it was always nearby when he walked his dog. Benson's eyes were on him, and David knew it. At the station, Anna and Greg worked tirelessly. They pulled records of Benson's private security company, looking for any trail that might reveal what he was hiding. Late one evening, they entered David's office with folders in hand. Chief, Anna began, we found something unusual. Benson's company receives payments from shell businesses. They don't lead anywhere real. Fake addresses, fake names. But the amounts are too large to be just neighborhood security work. Greg added, and some of the payments go directly through the HOA's accounts. It looks like he's been mixing community fees with outside money. David tapped the desk with his fingers. Money laundering. He's hiding illegal funds inside neighborhood operations. Anna nodded. It's more than just bossy rules and fake arrests. He's running a business under the cover of the HOA. David stood and looked out the window. That means the people of Pinewood are not only being controlled by fear. They are unknowingly part of his scheme. Their fees, their trust, he's using it all. Greg leaned forward. We can move now, Chief. We have enough to investigate officially. David turned back with calm resolve. Not yet. We need one clear link that shows Benson's hand directly. If we go public without it, he'll say it's all a mistake. He'll play innocent. And with the trust he holds here, some will believe him. That evening, David returned home, only to find another letter in his mailbox. This time it was typed. You are being watched. This is your final warning. Leave Pinewood HOA matters alone. He read the note slowly, then tucked it in his pocket. Whoever Benson had hired to shadow him was growing bolder. The next morning, David chose a different path. He visited Mark, his neighbor and quiet friend. Mark opened the door with concern in his eyes. David, you should be careful. People are talking again. The HOA told them you are trying to destroy the community. That's exactly why I came, David said firmly. Mark, I need your help. You've lived here longer than me. You know the people. I need to know who Benson trusts most inside the HOA board. Mark hesitated. You are stepping into fire, my friend. I've walked through worse, David replied. Finally, Mark sighed. There are three. A woman named Clara, she manages the HOA's records. A man named Jeff, who handles the finances. And another man, Robert, who speaks for Benson at meetings. They never question him. They follow his lead like shadows. Thank you, David said. That may be the key. That night, David drove quietly to the police station and joined Anna and Greg. They had already pulled files on Clara, Jeff, and Robert. Look at this, Anna said, pointing at the records. Jeff's personal account shows deposits far larger than his salary. And Clara signed off on the HOA's yearly budgets without question. Robert. He's been paid directly by Benson's company as a consultant. Greg added, if we can talk to one of them, if even one cracks, we'll have enough to bring Benson down. David nodded. Then we start with Clara. She manages the records. If anyone feels uneasy, it's her. The next day, David visited Clara at her small house on the far side of Pinewood. She looked nervous when she saw him at the door. Mr. Miller, she said quietly. What brings you here? I just want to talk, David said gently. I'm not here as the chief. I'm here as your neighbor. Clara hesitated but let him inside. The house was tidy, but her hands trembled as she poured tea. You know what Benson is doing, David said softly. You know the records don't match. You've seen the money moving through accounts. And I believe you're not proud of it. Clara looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. He said it was for the good of the community. He said if I didn't sign, I would lose my home. He has people watching me. David's tone was calm but firm. Clara, you don't have to be afraid anymore. If you speak, I will protect you. My officers will protect you. But I need your help to stop him. Tears filled her eyes. She covered her face with her hands. I can't live like this anymore. I'll give you everything. I kept copies. I knew one day I might need them. David felt a weight lift. Then it's time we show the truth. Clara led him to a small locked cabinet. Inside were folders filled with papers, budget sheets, transaction records, and notes signed by Benson himself. She handed them to David with shaking hands. As he left her house, David knew this was the break they needed. Clara had given them proof that Benson's hands were deep in the money trail. But as he walked back to his car, he noticed another black vehicle parked at the corner. A figure sat inside, unmoving, watching. David tightened his grip on the folder. Benson's men were close, but he no longer felt alone. With Clara's evidence, the tide was turning. The HOA's shield of power was beginning to crack. And David was ready to break it wide open. The folder from Clara felt heavy in David's hands as he placed it on his desk at the station. Anna and Greg leaned over the table, their eyes widening as they studied the records. "This is it," Anna whispered. "Proof that Benson himself signed off on false budgets. And these transfers go straight into his security company's accounts." Greg tapped one page with his finger. "Here's the smoking gun. Payments disguised as maintenance fees, but they're routed into shell companies. This is more than HOA work. He's laundering money on a big scale." David's voice was steady. "We'll take this to the district attorney soon. But first, we secure Clara. Benson will realize she spoke, and he won't sit quietly." That same evening, David returned to Clara's house with two trusted officers. He explained the situation to her clearly. "You are now a key witness," he said. "We'll move you somewhere safe until this is over. Benson will try to silence you." Clara nodded nervously, clutching her bag. "I knew this day would come. I just didn't think it would be so soon." They escorted her quietly to a safe location outside the neighborhood. David felt some relief knowing she was out of Benson's reach, at least for now. But Benson moved faster than expected. The very next morning, flyers appeared on doorsteps across Pinewood. Each one carried the HOA's official logo and a bold headline, warning, "Chief David Miller endangers our community." The paper claimed David was abusing his position to attack the HOA, twisting facts, and trying to destroy the neighborhood's unity. It even hinted that he was using police resources for personal revenge. Neighbors read with wide eyes. Some whispered in confusion, while others began to avoid David as he walked his dog that evening. Mark rushed to David's side. "They're turning people against you. I heard some saying you're dangerous. They believe the flyers." David stayed calm. "Benson wants to weaken me in the eyes of the community. If they think I'm the villain, he can act freely." Meanwhile, Greg brought more troubling news. "Chief, Benson called an emergency HOA meeting tonight. He's gathering the whole neighborhood. You can bet he's going to use that stage to paint you as the enemy." David thought for a long moment. "Then I'll be there too. If he wants a stage, I'll stand on it with him." That night, the community hall was filled with people. Chairs lined the room, and worried neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder. At the front stood Benson, dressed in his fine suit, smiling as though nothing was wrong. His loyal board members, Clara's replacements, no doubt sat beside him. "Friends," Benson began smoothly, "we are here to protect Pinewood. But one man threatens that safety. Chief David Miller. He hides behind his badge, but here in our neighborhood, he has no authority. He twists facts to destroy our harmony." Murmurs filled the hall. Some nodded in agreement, others looked uneasy. David stepped forward. The crowd turned to him, surprised he had come. He walked with steady steps to the front, stopping a few feet from Benson. "I live here too," David said, his voice strong but calm. "And I've served this city for years. I protect people from criminals. And now I see one standing right in front of me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Benson's smile flickered but quickly returned. "Big words," Benson said. "But where is your proof?" David held up a folder. "Here. Records signed by your own hand. Money stolen from the people sitting in this very room. Community fees mixed with payments from outside businesses. You built your power on their trust, and you betrayed it." The crowd stirred. Some leaned forward, whispering to each other. Benson raised a hand. Lies. Forged papers. He brings nothing but noise. David looked around the hall. Then ask yourselves, why does he need private guards dressed like police? Why does he send them to drag neighbors from their homes? Why does he silence anyone who dares to question him? The room fell into silence. Many faces now looked unsure. Benson's smile hardened. Enough of this. I declare Chief Miller banned from all HOA meetings. He no longer speaks for this community. He slammed his hand on the podium, and a group of men in dark uniforms stepped forward from the back of the hall. They were Benson's security, standing tall like guards. David stood his ground. Intimidation will not save you, Benson. The truth will come out. Every family here deserves better. Before Benson could reply, Anna entered the hall with Greg at her side. They carried more folders, copies of Clara's records. Anna raised her voice so everyone could hear. These documents are real. Witness testimony supports them. Benson's fraud is under investigation by the police department. Anyone who supports him is supporting crime. The room erupted into noise. Some neighbors stood and shouted. Others demanded answers. Benson's face tightened, his control slipping in front of everyone. David turned to the people. This is your neighborhood. You can let fear rule you, or you can stand together and be free from it. For the first time, Benson looked unsettled. His grip on Pinewood was cracking, and he knew it. But David also knew Benson would not give up easily. A man who built his empire on fear and lies would fight until the very end. And the fight was far from over. The hall in Pinewood was filled with noise and confusion. Neighbors argued in hushed voices, some angry, some scared. The folder of evidence had shaken their faith in Benson, but fear still lingered. Benson's men in dark uniforms stood like statues near the walls, their presence a reminder of his control. Benson raised his hand and shouted above the noise, "This meeting is over. Everyone go home. Do not listen to these lies." But David stepped forward, his voice steady. The meeting ends when the truth is heard. The two men stood face to face, only a few feet apart. Benson's smile was gone now, replaced by cold anger. "You're pushing too far, Chief," Benson said through clenched teeth. "This neighborhood belongs to me. These people follow me, not you." David met his stare without blinking. "This neighborhood belongs to its families. And I will not let you use them for your games." The tension grew thick in the room. Anna leaned toward David and whispered, "Chief, his men are ready to act." David nodded slightly. "Then let them see who they're dealing with." Greg quietly slipped outside to call for backup. They needed official presence now, not just words. Benson motioned to his guards. "Escort him out," he ordered. Two men in black uniforms stepped forward, reaching for David. But before they could touch him, David pulled out his real badge and raised his voice. "I am Chief David Miller of the City Police. Touch me, and you face the full weight of the law." The guards froze. They had expected an easy show of power, but the badge carried more authority than Benson's threats. The crowd gasped. Some neighbors whispered, "He really is the chief." Others began murmuring that they had been lied to. Benson's face darkened. "Badge or no badge, this is Pinewood. And I am in charge here." At that moment, sirens sounded outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the hall windows. Greg returned with a team of officers, their uniforms and presence unmistakable. "Community safety falls under police jurisdiction," Greg announced loudly. "And this gathering is now under official review." Benson's guards looked uneasy. Their false power was slipping away. Without Benson's protection, they were nothing more than hired men in cheap uniforms. Still, Benson did not surrender. He raised his voice, speaking directly to the neighbors. "Do you see?" He brings outsiders into our private matters. He wants to strip away our independence. Is that who you want leading you? Some nodded uncertainly, but many shook their heads. The room was dividing, and Benson's control was cracking. David lifted the folder of evidence again. Neighbors, this is not about independence. It is about honesty. This man has taken your trust, your fees, your peace, and turned them into his personal business. He has filled his own pockets while pretending to serve you. Anna stepped forward and laid copies of the records on a table. Anyone who wishes may read for themselves. The truth is written in his own signature. Several neighbors came closer, flipping through the papers. Their faces shifted from doubt to shock. One elderly man stood and pointed at Benson. I trusted you. I defended you. But you lied to us all. More voices joined in, rising against Benson. For the first time, Benson looked trapped. He stepped back, his eyes darting toward the exit. His guards closed ranks around him. David's voice cut through the noise. Running will not save you, Benson. It ends tonight. Benson glared at him. You think you've won, Chief, but you don't know the whole picture. With that, he signaled his guards. They pushed through the crowd, shoving chairs aside, and made for the back door. Stop them, David ordered. His officers rushed after Benson, but the guards blocked their way, buying time for Benson to slip out into the night. Chaos erupted in the hall. Neighbors screamed, children cried, and officers struggled to control the scene. David pushed through the confusion, determined not to let Benson escape. Outside, the cool night air hit his face. He spotted Benson running toward a black SUV parked under a streetlight. Two more men waited inside, the engine already running. Benson! David shouted. It's over. Benson turned, his face twisted with defiance. Not yet, Chief. You may have the papers, but you'll never break the network behind me. The SUV roared to life, and Benson jumped inside. The tires screeched as the vehicle sped away down the quiet neighborhood street. David stood in the glow of the streetlight, his fists clenched. He could not let this man slip through his fingers. Not after everything. Greg ran up beside him, breathing hard. Chief, he's on the run. What now? David's eyes stayed fixed on the disappearing SUV. Now we chase him. And this time, we don't stop until every layer of his network is exposed. Behind them, the hall still echoed with voices. Neighbors argued, cried, and tried to understand the truth that had been revealed. But David knew the battle was no longer inside that hall. The fight had moved to a bigger stage. Benson's escape meant there was more to uncover, more people, more money, more secrets. As the sirens echoed through the streets, David made a silent vow. Pinewood would be free, no matter how deep he had to dig. And Clark Benson would face justice. The night air was calm as David drove through the streets of Pinewood, his eyes scanning every corner. Clark Benson was on the run, but David knew he could not hide for long. With Clara's evidence and the officers at his side, David had a clear map of Benson's operations. This was the final step: expose Benson fully and restore peace to the neighborhood. Greg and Anna rode with him in the squad car. Chief, his security network is bigger than we thought, Greg said. He has connections outside Pinewood, and he's trying to move the money fast. David nodded. We'll stop both. The man and the scheme. No shortcuts. We do this clean and legal. Minutes later, they reached an industrial area outside the city where Benson had a secondary office for his security company. Surveillance cameras surrounded the building, and the parking lot was full of black SUVs similar to the one Benson had escaped in. Stay calm, David instructed. We need to surround the place and get everyone inside safely. Anna and Greg radioed their team. Within minutes, multiple units arrived. Officers quietly took positions around the perimeter, lights off, Engine silent. The tension was high. One wrong move could tip Benson off. David took a deep breath. On my signal, we move. Anna, you take the north side. Greg, south. I go for the main entrance. The team nodded. David knocked on the door of the building, a bold but controlled move. There was no response, only the faint sound of footsteps inside. He turned to his team. Go. Officers entered from all sides, moving with precision. Inside, Benson's men were caught off guard. Some reached for radios or doors, but the police were faster. Within moments, the office was secured. David moved toward Benson's private office. The door was slightly open. He pushed it gently and found Benson attempting to pack a bag. It's over, Benson, David said firmly. Step away from the bag and put your hands where I can see them. Benson froze. For the first time, there was no smile, no defiance. You think you've won, he whispered. Yes, David replied. Your lies, your threats, your schemes, they end tonight. Benson hesitated, then slowly raised his hands. Officers moved in and handcuffed him. David's heart was steady. Justice was in motion. The rest of Benson's team was rounded up, and the building was secured. Inside, officers found stacks of documents, computers, and financial records, all evidence of his manipulation, fraud, and illegal money transfers. Clara's records had led them to this moment. Back in Pinewood, news of the arrest spread quickly. Neighbors gathered, anxious to hear the outcome. David stood before them, calm and authoritative. Clark Benson will no longer control this neighborhood, he said. The HOA will be restructured, and anyone who misuses authority will be held accountable. Pinewood belongs to the families who live here, not to fear or lies. The crowd erupted in applause. Some neighbors, previously hesitant, came forward to thank David. Others shared their own stories of intimidation, which would now be addressed. Mark approached him quietly. Chief, you saved this place. I don't know how we could have stopped him without you. David smiled. It wasn't me alone. It was everyone who chose truth over fear. Pinewood is strong because its people care. Over the next days, the police department worked with the city and district attorney to ensure Benson faced full legal action. His security company was investigated, his accounts frozen, and his allies questioned. The HOA board was reformed with honest members, and new rules were put in place to prevent abuse of power. Clara returned to her home, finally free from fear. She thanked David personally. I never thought I could do the right thing without being punished, she said softly. You did the right thing, David replied. And that is what matters. As peace returned, David walked Max through the neighborhood one evening. Children played on the sidewalks, neighbors waved, and the tall trees swayed gently in the breeze. The sense of calm that had been broken by fear and lies was now restored. David knew there would always be challenges. But he also knew that courage, honesty, and a commitment to justice could overcome even the most clever schemes. Pinewood was safe again, and its families could live without fear. He paused near his house, looking at the streetlights and the homes around him. For David, the fight had been personal, but it had also been about something bigger: the safety and trust of an entire community. And as he looked at Max wagging his tail, David smiled quietly. Benson was behind bars, the truth was clear, and Pinewood could finally breathe freely. The neighborhood that had once been controlled by fear now stood united, stronger than ever. And Chief David Miller knew that as long as he served, justice would always have a place in Pinewood.